Well, good afternoon, everybody. Darren Saul here, your host of Playing with Perspective, the suspended animation podcast. I have the lovely Anne Cotterell here with me for episode 147. How you doing, Anne?
I'm doing great, thanks, Darren.
Thank you for joining.
147, eh?
Climbing. I'm due to do my 150th very soon with a great digital marketer and a good friend of mine, so I'm really looking forward to that one.
Fantastic. It's great.
Now, for everybody out there, we have some really interesting stuff to tackle today. How to reclaim your personal parenting powers. Anne is a leadership expert, developmental coach, and facilitator and founder of the Parents Leading Program. She is deeply passionate about developing parents as leaders in family and career and supporting parents to be role models that grow resilient, thriving kids. Having created her own personal journey as a parent, executive leader, and entrepreneur, she is well aware of what it means to navigate competing work-family demands and the undeniable importance of parental role modeling in growing resilient kids. The purpose of Anne's work is to move parents from just surviving to thriving in family, work, and relationships, including fully supporting the return to work transition. A self-development junkie by nature, Anne loves coffee, chats, spending time with her beloved family, friends, her greyhound Ellie, and she's also an avid gardener. So, Anne, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Darren. It's lovely to be here. I have my greyhound Ellie on the couch. She's fast asleep at the moment. She'll probably stay there for most of the day.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad that Ellie's into podcasts as well. That's good to hear.
Cheers.
So, Anne, I mean, what a great thing that you're doing, and a great initiative. And I'd love to learn more about the whole story behind it all. So maybe
Yeah.
give us a little bit of a little snapshot into how this all came about, and why you do what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds wonderful. Look, it's all started, if I take myself back even 25 years, because really the bulk of my career and my growth in terms of leading myself and others was back during that time. From a very young age, I had this deep interest and passion in developing people, developing others, and it was really during that time that I actually started my career in the medical technology sector.
Wow.
I've done every role under the sun, I think, from supervisory right up to executive leadership level. And it was during that time that I became a parent, actually, to two beautiful boys. I've got a 12-year-old and 13-year-old. And for me, what was really interesting was my personal experience around becoming a parent and then the return to work transition, and then realizing that, the transitions continue, and they've really continued right throughout my journey as a parent, as my career's grown, as my kids have grown. And so what really hit me like a ton of bricks was that juggle between, work, family demands, really trying to sustain that. And in a way, sustaining that meant really backgrounding my needs. And I wasn't great at supporting myself.
Yeah.
So what I noticed through, my own interactions with parents, as a coach, as a mentor, as a leader, was that my story was very much a familiar one. So I wasn't alone in that picture.
Yep.
And there wasn't a lot of support around at that time. It was really just emerging into organisations, this idea of supporting parents. And so what I've realised, and even looking at a lot of the statistics today around workplace burnout, Australia is a global leader in workplace burnout.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah. I mean, our statistics are 6% above the global average. More than 2/3 of working parents are experiencing stress and burnout and struggling to sustain their own well-being.
Do you think that's because the cost of living in Australia is so high compared to the rest of the world? I mean,
I think that's a really interesting question. Yes, there seems to be a zero-sum game in all of that, and the culture that we live in is one that's quite materialistic, one that's quite perfectionistic. And, there's this balance of us wanting more as a society and needing to be seen to have it to really sustain our own value and worth as individuals.
Yep.
But also that can bite us on the bum a bit when it comes to managing our energy levels and supporting ourselves.
Absolutely.
But the other aspect of that is that both parents also want to work these days, and so it's about and that's great for our economy too. The more people we can get into the workforce, the more women as well that we can grow into more senior roles in careers. We create, that's great role modeling too for our future generations. So
I 100% agree, and I think, and you're right. I mean, like even me, like I'm single, but I've the needs of with technology these days and the day to day, it's just every day you just find you're doing more and more and more. And because technology is becoming more and more efficient, all we do is fill the space with something else. And so before you know it, our days are just crazy from beginning to end. And as you say, if you have kids, it's probably not much time left.
You're absolutely right. And you know what has been really interesting with some of the parents I've been working with at the moment, even with this workplace flexibility that we've been able to obtain through COVID, which has, benefited many people, but also the story that I'm hearing a lot of is people are working more, they're actually working long hours. And this is coming out in the research. And while, a lot of people are saying, well, I don't need to catch that train to and from work. I get to save a couple of hours in a day.
Yep.
Actually, catching that train has some benefits because it gives us downtime.
100%.
And when we are moving from work day to actually then being a parent and being with our children, being with our family, there's no in between, and that's becoming stressful, and that's creating overwhelm.
So true. And you need it. You almost need that time before and after to kind of transition from work person or work hat to family hat, or family hat to work hat. And if it's all just, if it flows on seamlessly without the one next to the other, without any break, it's almost just burnout. It's just out of control.
It is, and it actually is the road to burnout. And here's the thing, what I notice is happening is as parents, we're not learning to listen to ourselves. In fact, it's almost as though listening to ourselves, sitting down, having a cup of tea, being in silence, being with ourselves, actually almost has a fear factor to it.
Yep.
If I'm not on the go, if I'm not doing, who am I?
Yep. And you also feel guilty. Like,
right.
If I stop for an hour or two and I'm not doing it, I was like, oh my God, I should be doing something. I feel guilty because I'm so used to working at that kind of pace. It's crazy.
Absolutely. And guilt is all on behalf of others. It's us in relation to others.
Exactly.
And so there's, and it's interesting when we talk about, stepping into our power as parents, that's all about responsibility. And so there's a responsibility for us as parents to actually have that cup of tea, to sit down and to listen to ourselves. And often not doing that is avoiding those feelings of guilt, is avoiding the emotions that are speaking to us, that are wanting to be heard, that are there to help us to understand ourselves.
Yeah, so true. And I suppose if we bring this back to the kids, I mean, what are you finding, and what does the research show these days? Obviously, that the kids aren't as resilient as they used to be.
Right. So this is really interesting because when we talk about power, we're talking about our ability to respond. So it's about responsibility in a way. And so responsibility is all about enacting within our span of control, knowing what is within our span of control and knowing what is within our span of influence. Yep. And so as parents, when we start trying to control what we can merely influence, or when we start enacting over responsibility, and that could be Let me give you a really, really simple example.
Yep.
When I, do my child's washing for them when they're 13 years old and really know how to do it themselves, what I'm doing is I'm disempowering my child from stepping into their own power,
Yep.
from actually giving them the impetus to experience their will.
Yep.
And experience that they can support themselves. And as we grow our children, we start by being very responsible for them because there's not a hell of a lot they can do.
Yep.
But then as they start to grow and develop and build their skills, we can choose to sit back and let them take risks. When we fear failure as an adult, we unconsciously drive that fear of failure in our children by not giving them, bigger boundaries, not letting them take risks. And so when we give our children an opportunity to learn through failure, we give them the opportunity to experience self-sufficiency, experience resilience, build self-confidence. All of those things are really related. And when we do that, we also enable healthy responsibility as a parent. And so that's how we build resilience. And there is, in my experience, working with parents, there's a lot of guilt because there's a lot that we put our own expectations of needing to be a good parent or a good enough parent.
That's right.
We get our value from the outside by being seen as good enough, by, maybe doing all these things for our children when they can do them for ourselves can be a sign of I'm really nurturing my child.
Yeah. And also, I suppose, keeping up with the Joneses as well. If everybody's expecting your child to do this or achieve that or go to this school or go to this university and whatever, yes, you also you put that pressure on them as well.
Yes, and that's a really good point, because what happens then is actually and unconsciously we are projecting our own expectations of ourselves onto our children. Mm-hmm. And I'm the first to admit that I've experienced that, projecting my need for my child to be capable in the classroom. Yep. Was a deep need for me as a child. And so what happens then is we start to shape our children through our own expectations into something we want them to be, yep, rather than giving them the space to shape their own way, find themselves.
Yeah, find out who they really are and what they want to be. Yeah, and what their unique gift is for the society and for the world.
Exactly, and finding that unique gift. And so our role and our opportunity as parents is it's like a gift we can unwrap, but they get to unwrap it and they get to reveal it to us, and we get to nurture and grow that.
I like that. Yeah. So it's up to parents to protect the gift, but let the gift unwrap itself.
Yes, that's right.
In a way, I like that.
Yeah.
And so, obviously we've spoken in the past, and I've heard you talk about the 4 personal powers that parents need. Maybe tell us a bit more about those.
Okay, so we all own these 4 powers, and these 4 powers represent what is within our span of control. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we all have them, and we have 2 external powers and 2 internal powers. So our internal powers are what I think, what I feel. I control those. No one else controls those. No one else is responsible for those. Mm-hmm. Right? And our external powers are what I say and what I do.
Right.
No one else is responsible for what I say and what I do.
So true.
As a parent, right?
Yep.
And so when we are accountable and responsible for what we say, we do, we think, we feel, then we are enacting healthy responsibility.
Great. Yep. Almost that, what's that famous saying? We can't control things, but we can control how we respond to things.
Exactly.
It's kind of the same tone.
Exactly. And we can't control our children. We can merely influence.
Yep. Yep.
We can't control as a young baby whether they're going to sleep or whether they're going to cry. We can
Yep.
influence that. Like we can
Facilitate in a way.
facilitate that process.
Yep.
But when we try to control it, we get frustrated. So we get
That's right.
frustrated when what we can only influence.
Yep. So true. So true.
Yeah.
And so a lot of your work is based on these 4 powers and helping parents to really understand them and use them to the best of their ability.
Yes, it is. In a way, it's almost every situation that we encounter, we are enacting in a way our 4 powers. And the thing is here that when we're enacting healthy responsibility, we're aware of what we are in control of and aware of what we can only influence. Now, I can't influence what you say, what you do, what you feel, or what you think, right? I can't, control that.
Yep.
And it's the same as parents when we feel responsible for another person's pain, when we feel responsible for another person's, thinking. And this can be in relationships, this can be at work, this can be in relationship with our child, recognizing that there are many contexts that influence our parenting. We can become over-responsible. And we're over-responsible, we start to be the rescuer. And so we're trying to rescue people from what they're feeling. So it might be rescuing our child from being angry. Don't be angry or don't be sad. And then the opportunity is, rather than rescuing, is to sit with that and to support them to understand what is this emotion they're feeling.
Yep.
But before we can even do that with our children, before we can teach emotional awareness and regulation within our children, we need to be able to facilitate that within ourselves.
100%.
And so under responsibility is when, when we play the victim. And so an example of that is complaining. Now, complaining is expecting others to do something about, is to take action on something that we care for,
right,
rather than us taking action towards it ourselves.
So there's so many different extremes of the same balance, and we have to really know what role we're playing to allow us to facilitate resilient in the next generations as well.
Right. And so it's about developing our own resilience. And a great example of what I see a lot is parents compromising their boundaries, compromising on their needs, saying yes when they really want to say no.
Right. And so why do they do that? Just pressure? Why would they be doing that?
Well, it's a great question that you ask, because it often, when we look at the why, it goes right back to childhood habits. And you might remember, as a child maybe, that no didn't always come with a positive response.
That's right.
So we learned as children, we learned all these safety and protective and love strategies on, how to keep safe and how to navigate this really complex world in our child's eyes.
Right.
And what a lot of us learned was that we didn't get a good response with no. And so we learned to avoid conflict, or we learned that yes, we'd receive love or affection or whatever.
Fascinating. So it's kind of hardwired into us from our childhood.
It is.
We're always looking for the yes response and not the no response.
It's so true. And so what happens is we're learning this while our personality's developing as a 3-year-old, as a 4-year-old. And so our brain is developing these neural networks that are informing our mental models of how we see the world, how we play in the world.
Yep. And
it's like a bodybuilder building up muscle. And the more we practice it and the more we use it, the more habitual it becomes, until actually it becomes our unconscious competence in a
Yeah.
way.
And we've set up a new neural pathway, a new neural
Yeah.
network that we use.
Yeah. And so we find often that these childhood strategies don't actually work for us as adults in the more complex world of parenting,
Yep.
particularly as working parents.
Okay, wow. So, I mean, what can parents do then these days to reclaim that if they've lost it? Have you got any tips
Yeah.
for them?
Absolutely. And the first tip is awareness.
Hmm.
So it's being aware that we are engaging. So for example, if I'm finding that I'm getting home from work late, or I'm working, an extra hour at night, which is really impacting the family time I have, because I keep saying yes.
Yep.
And so it's just starting with the awareness that this is what I'm doing. And so people get this sense that they're doing it, that something's not right.
Yeah.
But once they get awareness of it, they go, oh my gosh.
Yep.
And it's almost like we fall into the pothole, and then we're aware that we're falling into it, and then we're trying to get out of it. We need to keep falling in it a couple more times
Yep.
to start really becoming aware and what I call object to it. So become the observer of our experience.
Hmm.
And rather than judging our experience, going, oh wow, how crazy, this is really fascinating, I'm really curious about this, we can start to catch ourselves before we say yes
Yeah.
when we mean no.
A perfect example is just even non-related to this, but a perfect example is just how we manage our time. Like I'm also,
Yeah.
I'm getting more and more, becoming more and more aware and more conscious of how I structure my day and how much time I give for certain things and how much time I leave between certain things, because I don't want to be feeling like everything's just out of control. And that's a perfect example of what we can all do in the other respect as well.
Well, here comes the healthy, responsible part, is if we can rename it self-management rather than time management.
Ah, I like that.
Yeah, actually, what this is a difference between being the victim of not having enough time to actually being healthily responsible and saying, this is how I choose to spend my time.
Yep.
This is how I choose to invest my heartbeats in every moment of every day.
Yep.
And a lot of our choice is habitual, or it's driven by an assumption. It's this unconscious assumption that's running for us that if I don't do this, something bad's going to happen.
Yeah.
So if I don't say yes to my boss, I'm not going to get that promotion, or I might get made redundant, or he's going to think I'm not doing my job properly, or I'm not a capable person. All those things can flood in, different ones for different people. And so we compromise ourselves.
Yeah. And what comes to mind when we're speaking about this is actually sometimes the result can be the actual opposite of that, is that we actually gain more respect from the other party, and we actually are seen to be of higher value because we are setting ourselves boundaries. And I suppose the same thing can be related to children. If you give your child, the reason why they can't do this today, because you can't do it for whatever reason, but you'll say maybe we'll do it on the weekend or whatever, and you negotiate in a way, they might respect you more.
It's absolutely right. And from a child's perspective, and I know this personally with my own boys, they want boundaries.
Mm.
Boundaries is safety, but it's also being clear about the boundaries are going to change as your child grows and transitions.
Sure.
And so it's about we get ourselves into sticky situations as parents when we say yes, or when we avoid saying no, when you've had enough time on that, you've had enough screen time.
Yeah.
And so what happens is our kids go, well, this is okay. And so what we're doing is actually, well, we're creating an expectation. So the kid's going to say, well, this is okay. Whereas I'm saying, well, actually, it's not okay, but maybe there's something inside me that's fearing conflict. Maybe there's something inside me that's going, well, if I address this, then I've got to be consistent, and I've got to actually spend time being consistent and
Yeah.
honouring that boundary.
So true. So true. Love it. So we've kind of touched on awareness, creating boundaries. Um, any other tips people can use to reclaim their power in a way?
Yeah, I was kind of speaking to it a little bit beforehand, but awareness is a really big one, and then it's practice. I
Yep.
mean, I talked about letting go of that judgment. We've got a really big inner critic. We can really doubt ourselves and our actions sometimes, and it's sometimes we look to the outside world for the answer
Mm-hmm.
rather than sitting and inquiring for ourselves. And so what I often encourage a lot of parents to do is to sit with that inquiry about, well, what is right in this moment? Because stepping into our power is about not what's been right for us in the past, not what we think is going to be right in the future, but actually it's in this moment, what is
Yep.
right action.
Yep, that's right. And as you said before, during our lives, priorities change, things change. So self-awareness is key so we can continue to monitor what we need
Yeah.
at different times in our lives.
Yeah. And then it's actually taking that first step to challenge our assumption.
Mm-hmm.
And so the assumption might be, if I tell Johnny, screen time's enough, he's going to have a tantrum, or we're just going to have an argument, there's going to be conflict.
Yep.
And so it's actually starting to challenge the assumptions and say, is this true? Just because I've had a past experience of this,
Yeah.
is this really true? And is it going to be the end of the world if it does happen?
Yeah, exactly.
Am I going to, let's see if I can cope with this.
Yep. I love it. I love it.
And so that's testing our big assumptions, testing what we, we call them our competing commitments, those beliefs that we had.
Yep.
If we want to create the change we make, there's a belief that if we do that, we're going to step into our fear zone. There's going to be something unsafe happen for us.
Yep. And the funny thing is, this stuff is so common sense when you think about it. It's just basically setting expectations.
Well, it is. It's a setting agreements.
Yeah.
It's at the end of the day, we can have agreements with our kids, and even from a really, really young age, one of the practices we can start to engage to enact healthy responsibility for ourselves and our children and grow that self-sufficiency is to have agreements, to give our children choice.
Yep.
Now, the choices might be limiting when we're, it's like, which vegetable do you want to eat?
Carrots or beans?
But then, as we grow older, and I know for my children, it's okay. I know you want your screen time. I know that's how you engage with your friends, and that you've got homework commitments and you've got, sport commitments. So how are you going to work this? What's going to work for you?
Yep.
And so we gradually, as they grow and become more independent, we want to foster that independence.
Definitely.
We don't want to foster that neediness. We actually want to support them to make their own decisions and then hold them accountable to that.
Yep. Love it. Yep. So true. I mean, all this stuff, as I mentioned, it seems so common sense, but it just gets lost maybe because of emotion and our own baggage and our own preconceived ideas, our own upbringing and whatever else. But, this is real just common sense when you think about it.
It is, and at the same time, it can be a difficult path to tread, a challenging and a vulnerable path to tread, because it can be a vulnerable experience to see what we've not seen.
Yeah.
It can also, so we start to feel the discomfort of that, but then what goes beyond that is actually a sense of freedom, a sense of, I can actually do something about this, and that's me fully stepping into my power.
Love it.
And when we do this, when we actually start stepping into our power as parents, we automatically facilitate our children to do the same, because we are role modeling it. We role model it in our language.
100%.
We start using language of choice. I can, I could, rather than the language of restriction, of limitation, which is I must and I should, instead of
Yeah,
putting rules around ourselves.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, we use choiceful language, and our children learn it too.
Yeah, and they learn from the body language. They learn from demeanor. They learn from everything. All those other subtle
Yeah,
hints that are not verbal as well.
it's so true. They are the great observers, Darren.
Yeah, oh, I mean, absolutely. Human beings are made to absorb from one another.
Especially at such a young age when their personalities are developing. The first 2,000 days of a child's life are the most critical in terms of their physical, their social, their emotional, their mental development.
Wow.
And this is often the most stressful time for us as parents because, we're transitioning maybe back to work. Our kids might be transitioning from daycare to school.
Yep.
There can be relationship challenges.
Absolutely.
And yet what we're doing every moment of the day is we're role modeling to the first 2,000 days of that person.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, continue.
Yeah, so one of the frames that I bring to parenting is that as parents, we are the most influential leaders on this planet. We really are. Because we are leading and nurturing our next generation. I mean, I'll be sitting in an aged care facility, hopefully not, but I'll be old and wise, and the babies of today will be prime ministers and leaders of this country, and the job that we do as parents today will pave the success for our planet and people in the future. So it's deeply, deeply meaningful and important work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to hear more about your program, the Parents Leading Program. Tell us more about that.
Right. So this is a program that I've been curating over the last 6 months. It's a program that I'm currently piloting before I take to the public, which I'm going to be doing in July. The Parents Leading Program is all about supporting parents and developing parents as leaders in family and work.
Nice.
So it really is empowering parents with self-leadership, leading and supporting themselves. And so it's an 8-week program that has eight specific modules embedded into it. And one of those modules is specifically what we've talked about today, stepping into our power, enabling, establishing healthy boundaries.
Love it.
So it's an online, interactive, live program. And I've created the online experience because I do recognise as parents, we kind of need to have that level of flexibility.
Yep.
So it's 90 minutes a week over 8 weeks. We come together, I create a supportive learning community of parents. So, the space that we create for each other is really, really important. So we have a lot of, ways of relating around that. We do a lot of interactive group work, discovery sessions. And so really what I start with, there are 4 key aspects to the program. So what I start with first is supporting people to get clarity, right? So clarity on maybe we take a parenting challenge that they're having, clarity on where they are now, and what's getting in their way and where they want to be instead. And so then as part of that process of clarity, we can start to give them more certainty around the step-by-step processes that they can start to implement to make the change that they want to see for themselves.
Love it.
And so that enables parents to kind of move towards consistent action, as opposed to the inconsistent action where, they're not sure, and they're literally giving away their time and energy through that. So starts with clarity, then it goes into ownership, and that's really what we've been talking about today. So ownership is stepping into power, our power, establishing healthy boundaries for ourselves,
Nice.
learning to meet our own needs and get back our time and energy. And a question that I ask there, this is a good question for anyone, is how much time do you spend in a day, in a month, in a week, in a month, doing things for others when they're perfectly capable of doing those things for themselves?
Oh, what a great question.
Yeah. And so they're the sort of things that you can start putting on your not to do list, because others are capable, and you'll be amazed at how much time our parents can get back just from that one little simple action.
Wow, I love it. I love it.
So
Awesome.
enabling healthy responsibility. And then the third one is really about relationships and connection, and it's all around resourcefulness. So it's really about the emotional awareness that I spoke to earlier. When we learn to regulate and understand ourselves through our emotional experience, we role model that for our children. We learn to bring more resourceful responses to stressful situations or situations as parents, instead of reacting from our habituated way of being. Because we've got awareness, we can choose how we want to respond in any given situation. So we look at, managing conflict positively. We look at our relationship with anxiety and gaining calm under pressure experiences.
Right.
And so that is really about enriching our relationship with ourselves and with others as well. And then the final piece is confidence, the confidence to back ourselves, 100% as parents, to let go of self-doubt and to step into that uncertain space, to take small risks, to create the change and test our assumptions.
Yep.
The ones that have us saying yes when we want to say no.
Absolutely.
Those sort of things.
And the way to build confidence is just, I suppose, to just start small and just try and test and test.
Yeah, and also let go of those beliefs. I can't fail.
Mm-hmm.
Let go of the perfectionistic beliefs, and a lot of what we do is focus on outcomes rather than the process itself, and that's where we have these lofty expectations of ourselves. And so, as I mentioned before, the confidence comes through self-efficacy, and that comes through empowerment, and that comes through enacting, healthy responsibility.
Awesome. And I mean, I love this. Just the fact that parents can learn all these things, and if the kids are seeing parents do this, they will learn so much by proxy.
They will learn it. And what I notice is the language I use, my children use too. So if I say to my 13-year-old, what's your perspective on this?
Love it.
And he says to me, Mum, what's your perspective on this? And so the ways that we engage and with our children, they get engaged that back. And a great example is listening.
Yeah.
I see so many Facebook posts of how do I get my child to listen? How do you get your child to listen? Well, the only way you'll get your child to listen is to deeply listen to them. And the only way you can do that is to first and foremost be listening to yourself.
Yeah.
Because when you've got your shit in the way while you're trying to listen to someone, you're not really listening.
No, yeah. And love it. It just creates the environment for proper exchange and proper attention.
Yes, and that's where connection is created.
Mm-hmm.
Deep connection.
Yep.
And that connection is sustainable, long-lasting connection. And that's where when a child feels listened to, that in itself creates self-sufficiency, creates confidence.
Incredible. I mean, this stuff it's so far-reaching when you think about the effects of these simple things that we do, what it actually does in the upbringing and the confidence and the capability of the next generation.
Yes, and here's the thing too, we often don't see those small things. We look for the big results, but actually it's those small steps and all of them, that they're the most important things. If we can count the little things along the way, That's what makes the difference.
Yeah, so true. And the kids really remember the little things.
Absolutely.
They
So do
really
the big ones.
do. I love it. So, Anne, I mean, how do people find out about you and your program if they want to learn more?
So there's a couple of places that people can go to. They can go to, I have a Facebook page called Parents Leading.
Great.
Okay, and I also have a Facebook page called Red Leaf Studio. So I have started my Parents Leading program under Parents Leading. Sounds confusing, but that's where it is. I also have a website, redleafstudio.com.au and parentsleading.com.
Okay.
And you can find me on LinkedIn under Anne Cotterell.
Beautiful.
And you can find me on Facebook as well. So please do look me up. If you want to find out about the parenting program, the Parents Leading program, it's all on the website. Just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to chat.
Awesome. Does that run at a certain time every quarter, or how does that actually work?
So I'm looking to run it quarterly, and the next program will run in July.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Perfect. Love it. Well, Anne, thank you so much for coming on the show. I mean, it's great to be able to tackle different types of topics every now and again, and this is fascinating to me. I've always been fascinated by human behavior, human interaction, and, you know, all the stuff we're talking about is just as important, or is important for kids and parents as well. You know, this is all a part of our self-development, really.
Absolutely. It certainly is. And it's a wonderful thing to be able to explore when we choose courage over comfort. Hey.
Yep, I love it. Well, I mean, is there anything that you want to leave us with before we finish up?
I'd just like to say thank you so much for the opportunity to chat with you. I've really enjoyed it, Darren.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Awesome. So everybody out there, I hope you've, found this as fascinating as I have. And if you're interested in what we discussed, please check out Anne's website and all the other websites, which I'm going to put in the show notes for you all and the links. Check out her program. And I'm sure that you'll be hearing plenty more from Anne in the near future.
Beautiful.
So everybody, thanks again. We'll see you very, very soon for another episode. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Darren, for having me.
Pleasure, and bye for now.
Bye.